Remember a few weeks ago when I was like, don't do anything hasty and wait on your ideas for a minute? Well, I've kept up my end of the bargain, and I did not change the name of this podcast, and I currently have no plans to do so. I did, however, create a new logo for the podcast, which will be coming out on the full moon this coming weekend. I waited, channeled my desire for change into something else, and something really cool came from it, so I hope that you were able to do the same. I make all the stuff for the podcast in-house, so the logo, music, and all the designs for my zine, they're all me. I do want to give a shout out to my graphic designer, though, because they create the cool 90s cartoon-style pieces for both my weekly weather and Moon Matters, and then I just play around with them and slap them together. Sometimes when I slap together, it sucks at first, but that's part of the creative process. Putting out something subpar for the entire world to see, and then one day just changing it into something cooler right before your eyes. That's the Sagittarian way. Here on the weekly Astro Weather, we hold each other accountable, especially when we're working with mutable Sagittarian energy like we have been. But Sagittarius season is long gone now, so hopefully any crazy impulses you were fighting are also fizzling out. This is the last forecast for the 2025 calendar year. I can hardly believe it myself. I don't know what's more hard to believe, though, that 2025 is ending this week or that I've been making consistent weekly episodes since June. Let's not jinx it and dive into the last astro weather forecast for 2025 and technically the first for 2026. I gave a bit of a spoiler in the intro when I said that I was releasing the new podcast logo on the full moon. That full moon is just one of the many important transits that are helping us to close out and start the new year. But it's last on the list as it doesn't happen until the very end of the week. So let's start from the beginning and work our way towards the full moon. The week starts off pretty chill astro weather-wise, but I'm sure people will still be traveling and coming down off the holiday high, only to move into the next phase of the holidays, the new year. The earlier parts of the week have some squares with Mercury in Sagittarius and both Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. These squares take place in the days leading up to Mercury's ingression into Capricorn on the first of the year. Before we get into the new year, we have to struggle through some communication misfires and travel mishaps. Mercury is going to feel confused and stifled in the earlier parts of the week, which means our mental world will feel this energy as well. When you're met with an obstruction or opposition to your plan, don't take it as a slight. Take it as something to think on. Delays, frustrations, and mental exhaustion is starting to build, especially if we keep throwing the same solution at an old problem. When you receive pushback, make a note and move on. Mercury's last movements in Sagittarius can either feel really frustrating or be really illuminating. It's all in how you approach what we're being shown, denied, or what's being brought to our attention. If you're starting to already feel burnout before the new year even hits, then definitely make time to slow down, enjoy the moment, and ask yourself why you're putting so much pressure on everything, including yourself. Mercury squaring Saturn and Neptune in its final moments of Sagittarius is kind of like the last check-in to make sure we're settled in our ambitions that we put into motion during the new moon. Try not to overthink things or make them more complicated than they need to be early on in the week. Embody the mindset of mutable fire and pivot as needed for just one last time. The frenzied nature of mutable fire fully dies out come New Year's Day. Mercury ingresses into Capricorn and it joins Mars, the Sun, and Venus, all of which are sitting closely together when the new year begins. So come the new year, we're moving from a mutable fire mindset to a cardinal earth one. Last week, I was saying how our minds hadn't fully caught up yet because Mercury was lagging behind, but not anymore. We're diving into 2026 with ambition and our sights set on something. What that is will be personal to you and your natal setup, but there is something you're honed in on within the realm of Capricorn or something that has a Capricornian nature to it in general. With Mercury joining the rest of the personal planets, it's going to feel less like our head is in the clouds and more like we're actually taking pragmatic steps towards what we want. While this sounds awesome, because it is, I do want to warn that this can make us feel overly ambitious because the whole new year, new me mentality. Keep your goals honed and focused. Don't take on a bunch of one-off, random, gimmicky goals just because it's the new year. And I'm pointing that sentiment mostly at myself. Do not download Duolingo's Pro Edition for the umpteenth time. Do not do it. Remember that Venus in Capricorn wants quality over quantity. Stick with what you were working on during that Sagittarius new moon and focus on a goal that has the potential to create a real long-term impact in your life. If we split hairs and make a bunch of silly New Year's resolutions that don't actually matter and that we know we're not going to stick to, then we're going to lose sight of the bigger goal and potentially squander all this really juicy, dig-in Capricorn kind of energy. This is a time when we can really get something done, but pick one or two things. Don't overload yourself with silly goals that you know you're not going to complete anyway. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't set goals. Absolutely set goals, but make them make sense. Mercury ingressing into Capricorn will allow us to embody a more pragmatic mindset, which will be helpful in striking down pipe dreams and goals that are just actually distractions from the bigger picture. Sagittarius season was for dreaming big and was like one big brainstorming session. Capricorn season is for wading through all the bad ideas and finding that one thread of gold that's worth spinning into something bigger. So we have Mercury ingressing into Capricorn and setting our minds straight for the new year. What else do we have? Well, Chiron stations direct on Friday, January 2nd, so that's a pretty big deal. Chiron station retrograde back in July, and we're finally beginning to move forward again come the new year. If you receive my retrograde guides for Chiron, then maybe go back and give them a glance to see how the wounds have changed and developed since July. We're getting closer to the end of Chiron's time in Aries, thank goodness, but we still have until about 2027 until it fully ends, until Chiron fully leaves. Chiron stationing direct means that we're moving forward with our healing, and our introspection around the wound will begin to lessen. We're still going to have to put our healing into practice as the wound will continue to show up in new ways, and Jupiter is also still squaring Chiron for the entire week. I've been bringing this up like every week now, but it's still happening. So as I've been saying, look for the wound to show up in new ways or to morph into something that you haven't seen before, but you should be very prepared to deal with it no matter how it manifests. Remember that the wounds of Chiron and Aries pertain to the house that Aries rules for you, but in general, those wounds are going to center around self-confidence, assertiveness, speaking up for and going after what we want, and even wounds of the ego or the father to a degree. The house of Aries is really going to dictate things, but for example, if you're a fellow Libra rising, then the wounds of the 7th house have been where Chiron's been exerting most of its energy. Standing up for what we want and even deserve in a relationship, healing past hurts, finding our assertiveness in a relationship, and creating a stronger connection to the other, those are all going to be ways the wound presents. And just for instance, I've said this before and I'll say it again, but since Chiron has been in Aries, my 7th house, I've gotten married, divorced, and remarried. It's been a wild trip. I've learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn about relationships and intimacy. So hopefully we can close this out strong in the coming years, but we still have a little bit of time left with Chiron and Aries. So again, if you have my Chiron retrograde guide, then definitely go back and maybe get a refresher on how this retrograde impacted your healing, as well as how the wound has changed since the summer. The last thing on this week's docket is the full moon in Cancer on Saturday the 3rd. The moon doesn't even give us a full week before it blasts us with major illumination within the realm of Cancer for the new year. The moon will be domiciled for this lunar event, making the energy of the new year feel emotionally intense, intuitively powerful, and a time to dig into the realm of Cancer in a deeper way. The full moon's energy will be opposing all those planets in Capricorn that I mentioned, the Sun, Mars, and Venus, and then Mercury as well. So it should make for an interesting juxtaposition between intuition and pragmatism. Patrons, look for your full moon horoscopes later this week for more on that. Between the domiciled full moon and Capricorn's pragmatic ambitions, we've got plenty to keep us busy as we close out 2025 and begin 2026. 2025 ends with a little confusion for Mercury, but quickly picks up the pace when Mercury gets its mind right in Capricorn, and then the moon's illumination shows us another part of the equation that we may not have considered. I hope you all have a wonderful transition into the new year. Thank you for your support over the last couple of months and always ebbing and flowing with my mutable energy. Look for a new podcast logo next week, and I'll see you in 2026. Thank you for tuning into this week's forecast. If you want a more detailed look at what this week's astro weather holds for you personally, go to my website, moonmattersastrology.com, and sign up to receive my zine. You can also find me on Patreon by searching for Moon Matters. The best way to keep up to date with my work or to book a reading with me is to sign up for my mailing list on my website. I'll meet you back here next week, but until next time, later days.